Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, with interviews and advice on building your professional network, brand, and a purposeful second income from students, residents, and innovative professionals.
Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast. I'm Tony Guerra, and I'm a pharmacist here at Des Moines Area Community College. And I have today my APPE student, Ashleigh Arndorfer, who is a P4 from Creighton University College of Pharmacy. She went through the distance program and has been with me for 5 weeks. So Ashleigh, welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I finally figured out how to put two people in a room. We used to do this where I was in this room and somebody else was in the classroom. So I'm pretty excited. We're opposite each other. But the question that starts it all off is always the same. Everyone's leadership road is a little different. Tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Before coming into pharmacy school, I was a pharmacy technician. I've been working as a technician or a student for the last 12 years now. And I decided to go back to school and pursue becoming a pharmacist. And through that, I learned about Creighton's distance program. And at first, I wasn't so sure about it, but after meeting with everyone on campus, going through the interview process, I was really impressed with the program and the curriculum and how it's exactly the same as the campus-based program. So through the distance program, I was able to keep my job at the pharmacy that I've been at and not have to move out of my house, which was really nice. So I made a lot of connections with my classmates in the distance program, and it's been a very good experience for me.
So tell me a little bit about making connections with classmates in distance. It seems that we actually get further apart in our P4 year where we go out to our APPEs. How do you connect with other people, or how did Creighton set it up so you could connect with other people while you were a distance student?
Creighton did a really good job of when we first arrived on campus of having a welcome week for all of the distance students. And it gave us a really good chance to get to know each other. And one of the biggest surprises that I had through my experience with the distance program is how close my classmates and I all became to one another. I expected to be off on my own without any support, but in reality, I feel like we have a stronger connection than maybe some of the campus students have with each other. Even though we are spread throughout all over the place in the country, we have our own little friend groups, our study groups, where we can meet over Skype. We had a lot of group activities through class, and we had chances to socialize too while we were on campus and going to national meetings. We've all really just stepped up and forced ourselves to form those connections and have really met some of our best friends through that.
Well, there's always challenges in pharmacy school, some things that are unexpected. What's the toughest challenge you faced as a student in pharmacy school?
I think particularly being a distance student, the challenge is time management and dedication. It would be really easy to fall into the trap of not staying up on classes and getting behind, and not having that accountability of going to class every day. You really have to force yourself into a schedule and to stay on top of things. So I've learned a lot from that process of how to be really self-motivated, how to create a schedule and stick to that, and how to really just learn how to prioritize my time.
It sounds like in a given week, it would actually be helpful to know what a week looks like as a distance student. So you're a campus student, you're told this is when the class starts, this is when the class ends. But tell me a little bit about what a typical week would look like for you. You pick the year and just let us know which one, and then what a week would look like for you.
Okay. So the classes are recorded while they're being given for the campus students, and then they're posted online for us to view within 2 hours of class being over. New technology allows for us to watch the classes live and ask questions during that time frame. So that's really been helpful. So for me, I would be working about 12 hours a week, and I had built an Excel spreadsheet for myself outlining my schedule for the day, where I would block out time for however long the lecture would take, and then I would meet with my study group partners 3 or more times a week. Through class we also had, and this is especially important during P3 year. Almost every single one of our classes required group work. And since we are spread throughout the United States, it was an entirely different challenge trying to coordinate all of these meetings across multiple time zones. So there was always those built in. And then our case studies in therapeutics P2 and P3 year, we would meet over Skype and have an hour to work through a case together. And then the second hour, we would meet over Skype with a facilitator from Creighton, and we would present the case. She would ask us questions and make sure that we were really grasping the information.
So it sounds like with some of the technology and the telepharmacy and the challenges that we have ahead of us, you guys are a little bit up on the technology or really becoming skilled at it. We talk about the difference between what it is to learn something and what it is to become skilled at it. Tell me a little bit about how you feel that being a distance student has really helped you kind of get a hold of technology. So when we'll talk a little bit about your teaching in a bit here, but when I ask you to help me with things on Blackboard and things like that, because you're a distance student, you're like, well, I live in a learning management system. So tell me a little bit about how you think you might have gained an advantage in those systems because you were a distance student.
Definitely. I do feel like I have an advantage over somebody who's not as well versed in these systems because like you said, it was how we would survive. We didn't have the option of printing off a paper and running it down to the professor's office. We had to learn to work through technical challenges, always have a backup plan available, and just knowing how to use the technology, like you said. And another big part of that, too, was that all of our exams were proctored over an online proctoring service. And there were several times where there'd be technical difficulties, either with internet connection or webcam not working or microphone not working. So I feel like that, too, also taught me to kind of relax and just overcome adversity and realize that there is always a solution to the problem. You just have to look for it.
In the future, you're going to be likely teaching as part of your residency, and that teaching may include teaching at a pharmacy school. Tell me a little bit about what it's like to teach in front of a larger classroom of 60 or 70 students and how you developed your skills there. You were engaging, they were replying to you, they were coming up to you after class, they were passing me to come up to you after class, which is, of course, both excellent and like, seriously, come on. But tell me a little bit about talking in front of a large group. I know that many pharmacy students are a little bit more on the introverted side, and what allows you to just get up there and do it?
That's a really good question. And honestly, prior to teaching that first class, I was very apprehensive of being in front of that large of a group. But I have to say, I really love it. I'm surprised by that it came so naturally to me. And I wish I had a good answer of how I do it. I feel like the reason that I was so engaging, as you say, is being so recently in the classroom, I could really connect with what I would want to get out of a lecture. And so I just took that and incorporated that into my teaching style.
I'm going to try to get the grammar right on this, but I've heard that teaching like you'd like to be taught, I'm sure I got that wrong, is a great mantra to get you through the classroom and get it so that the students enjoy being with you. So a lot of times, the very first time someone will try to push information at you. Tell me a little bit about putting in some fill in the blanks, not using PowerPoints, some of the things that you felt the students responded to so that someone who's trying to teach a larger class could learn from it.
I think that we did get away from doing PowerPoints in that class that we were teaching together. And having sat through many classes where it's just slide after slide, I felt like it was a great break from that. We did have a system where it was a fill-in-the-blank worksheet where they were required to be engaged with class and required to follow along. And I think that made a big difference because as I was talking and would take a break to write down a drug name, then they would have that opportunity as well. And one other thing that I incorporated into that fill-in-the-blank worksheets is other questions just to stimulate discussion and thought-provoking ideas. And that gave an opportunity to expand on those ideas. And I'm really grateful that the students were so engaged in that.
So tell me a little bit about your future area of expertise. You're interested in community and AmCare, so we're going from the large group now to the one-on-one. Tell me a little bit about what you hope for your future practice.
Right. I am interested in community pharmacy and AmCare. I really thrive off of building a one-on-one relationship with my patients. I really like the patient education aspect where I can sit down and talk to somebody and make sure they're understanding their entire disease state and what these medications are doing for them. I like to say that pharmacy to me is not about the prescriptions, it's about the patients. And that connection is very important to me, I think, for their overall health. So moving into the residency year, I'm really looking for a program that will give me the opportunity to do both teaching in a larger and a smaller group setting, as well as patient education.
So tell me a little bit about your residency journey. We get from time to time some options as to when and where you get to go, but really it kind of comes fast and furious. So you had particularly a 2-day back-to-back interview process. Can you tell me a little bit about really just, I guess, your preparation for that kind of a long run? So I'm a marathoner, so my preparation goes over months and months and months. You're given, I think you had a week. So tell me a little bit about what you do in that week, to get ready for something that's very important to you.
It is very important, but also important to me was not letting it stress me out too much, because I knew that if I tried to come into it being over-prepared, that it would come across as being cold, and that no matter what I did, I could never be prepared enough. So the thing that I did going into these interviews, and you're right, it was a long 2 days, was just being myself. And while I could anticipate some of the questions that would come at me, typical interview style questions, I didn't feel like I had to have a canned answer. I really just wanted to be natural and be myself. And that's what I kept telling myself, is that if they don't like who I really am, then it's not a good fit for me and it's not meant to be anyway.
Yeah, we heard from Brandon Dyson at TLDR Pharmacy that once you're at the interview, you're qualified for the interview, and it sounds like you're kind of echoing that, what was a good fit, and you want to make sure you have enough sites that you're going to know that, okay, this one would be a good fit, this one would not. But what are some of the things that you could tell someone who is going into an interview maybe in the next couple weeks that I guess in terms of what to prepare for, what does that day look like? What does your morning look like? Or how do you communicate with the residency program director afterwards? What's your process for making sure that it's as professional as you can be and putting your best foot forward?
Yeah. I can speak to the experience that I've had so far. I do still have some upcoming interviews, but I know that every site's process is a little bit different. Some sites you're on-site interviewing for 8 hours, others it's half a day. With the particular program I just interviewed with, it was a series of 6 interviews over 2 days, and it was an hour at each site. So I can't speak to preparing for all different types, but do know as much about the site as you possibly can going into it. They provide a lot of information through ASHP, and most sites have their own websites. So just have a good understanding of what the program is about, and I can guarantee that anywhere you go, you'll be asked, why did you pick this site? So if you want to be prepared for one question, you really should know exactly why you had that site on your list to begin with and what you can bring to that residency program. And then overall, just make sure you're dressing professionally, and remember, even if you aren't being asked interview questions, if you're with the program director, a preceptor, a a resident, anyone on site, you are still in the spotlight, and that is still part of your interview.
Yeah, I heard over and over again, the interview starts when you get in the parking lot. So tell me a little bit about, I guess, you're doing the residency interviews now. What's the way that you think that you're going to try to put things in order? I think that's going to be very tough for students. I think there's going to be some that are great and some that are, that was, maybe not what I thought it would be. Obviously, I'm not asking you to tell me which ones you're going to put in the match in which order, but what do you feel is going to be your process as you kind of start thinking through some of the maybe logical steps that, this place makes sense that way, but then some of the places that, I just got a really good vibe from over there. Most of your sites are in the Midwest, and you've got Iowa nice, Minnesota nice, all that stuff. But tell me a little bit about your process.
That is an excellent question, and if you have any advice on that, I am feeling very overwhelmed with trying to put these sites in a rank order list. We talked a lot about it just being a good fit. So having that connection and that vibe, I feel is incredibly important. It's one of the bigger factors when you're comparing all of these excellent sites to one another. But I also just have to take into account what areas of interest I really have. Each of the sites I've interviewed with so far are very unique. And so I have to sit down, make a list of what each site has to offer and which of those are most appealing to me, in addition to just how I felt with the staff and the preceptors at each location.
Okay. So let's get into a little bit about the distance learning versus the classroom. In some ways, online has been given kind of a bad name. Oh, you took the online class, that must have been easier. But in this case, I've heard time and again, the online requires actually much more self-discipline. Tell me how the self-discipline that you developed in the 3 years as a distance student you feel will help you through your residency.
It definitely does require another level of self-discipline. And one great example of that, not just during the first 3 didactic years, but all of our experiential requirements, setting up rotation sites and all of that falls on the responsibility of the distance student. Because my classmates and I are in all different states, it's hard for the experiential office to have relationships and connections with reputable sites in each of those states. So as a distance student, we are expected to reach out and build our own connections and set up each of our rotation sites. And that included our IPPEs as well. And it was very scary, the thought of having to set up these APPEs on our own. But I feel like that too gave me so many more skills in being professional, gaining confidence in talking to other people, and also just having a good sense of whether or not a site would be a worthwhile experience. Because I don't know anybody who's gone through any rotations at these particular sites, I had to really have a discerning attitude about whether or not it was going to be a good experience. And so far, I haven't had any duds.
Okay. So, where do you see yourself after graduation? Obviously, your first kind of milestone will be a residency, community, or AmCare or something like that. But not geographically, but where do you see yourself working, practicing? I'm sure this was already a residency question many times over, but where do you see yourself practicing so that someone else could articulate this to the residency sites they're interviewing at?
For me, I really need to have that patient interaction, and I want to be able to use my clinical knowledge. So for my future, I see myself either in a clinic-based setting with AmCare, working with physicians and meeting with patients about chronic disease management, or taking the skills that I'll learn in residency and taking them to a community pharmacy that doesn't already have the additional services that are provided at some of these other sites, like disease state management, immunizations, MTM, and then even going beyond and just collaborating with providers. So my ultimate dream would be to take those skills and the knowledge that I gained through residency and take them to a community pharmacy and grow them so that pharmacy can continue to move forward in that model.
Well, that's great, the practice model. So tell me a little bit about either the best pharmacy advice or the best career advice you might have ever given or received.
One thing that sticks out to me is before going on rotations and just talking about how apprehensive I was about now going out and practicing, I would always say I felt like I didn't know enough. And pharmacists and educators and other people at the college would say, you know more than you think you know.
It's such a cliche. It's so true.
And I would laugh it off every single time. But as I've been going through rotations and I've been asked questions, it's like, oh, I do know that. And so that is a piece of advice that I brushed off at first, but I've really taken to heart over the last year. And it's one that I'll continue to give other students who are going on rotations because it is true. So people really struggle often with time management. You've had a little bit extra challenge with time management with the distance pathway and making sure that you're not only connecting. You're on campus and it's not like, so that meeting's Central Time, right? Yeah, it's always Central Time. We're in, Nebraska, it's Central Time. But you're like, okay, wait, so Eastern Time, Central Time, wait, does Arizona, have daylight savings, and so you've got all those other things. But on a daily basis, what is it that keeps your work on track? I am a big list person. I have to write it down, otherwise it's not going to happen. And I really get a lot of enjoyment of being able to cross things off my list. But I also rely on technology too. Every appointment, every due date goes into my calendar on my phone with reminders, just so that it's always there with me and that reminder is going off so that I don't forget to do anything. So I think being able to write it down and also just use technology to my advantage to be organized has been a lifesaver over the last 3 years.
And what inspires you?
That's a good question. I've got a lot of kiddos in my life. I've got a younger brother and sister, nieces and nephews, and a lot of other kids in my life, and I really just want to be a good role model for them. So everything that I do every day, pushing myself forward, is so that they can look up to me and that I can be a supportive resource for them in the future.
That's great. Thanks so much for being on the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com, in print, ebook, and audiobook. Thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag #PharmacyLeaders.